All right, everybody, welcome back again to the channel. Now, in the last video, we introduced to us Jenkins and we talked briefly about CI/CD. And I believe that from that video, you have been able to understand a little better what CI/CD is all about. Now, in today's video, we want to go into the installation of Jenkins. Okay, because we need to log in into Jenkins to basically exploit and understand how to use Jenkins to automate all the manual processes that we've been doing, before now. Right? Things like building a Docker file, building a Docker image from a Docker file, deploying that Docker image to an environment where the image can be run as a container and things like that. So in today's video, we want to go through the Jenkins documentation and walk through what are the things that are required in order for us to install Jenkins and what are the different ways by which we can actually install, Jenkins. So that is what we want to look at in today's video. So let's head right into that. Now, right here, if you look at this space, I have documentation here, right here. And then, of course, we're going to go to installing Jenkins. So I'm going to click on that. And that will take us right into the Jenkins installation page, like you can see on my screen. Now, if you look on the left side, all right, you can see installing Jenkins, and then you see Docker, Kubernetes, Linux, Mac OS, Windows, all right, WAR, and all of that. Now, that tells you basically that Jenkins can be installed in a number of ways. Okay, so which means Jenkins can be installed as a Docker container. You can install Jenkins even within a Kubernetes cluster. You can also install Jenkins on the Linux machine or Mac OS, or even on the Windows machine. You can have your Jenkins running on your Windows server. All right. Now, there are pros and there are cons, okay, to all of these processes. Okay. Because when you run Jenkins as a Docker container, what are the advantages? Okay, and what are the disadvantages? Now, one thing that you must realize when you are going with any of this installation is that Jenkins depends on a lot of plugins. That is one thing you need to know, which means whatever it is you want to do with Jenkins, you need to find the appropriate plugin that will, help you to achieve that, within your pipeline. Okay. Now, when you install Jenkins as a Docker container, now, if you would use that Jenkins, server, which is running as a container, to build Docker images later on or to do something with Docker, right? Perhaps even if you want to use Docker agents, okay, in Jenkins, you must understand that there are certain things that you will have to do in order for Jenkins, running as a container to communicate with the Docker that you have installed on the server that the Jenkins container itself is running in. And that can bring a lot of complexity. Okay, so of course, when you run Jenkins as a container, it is lightweight, it doesn't consume too much space, you don't need a large server, to run it and all of that. But of course, you need to also understand that when you are dealing with large builds, okay, you have a very large pipeline. There are a lot of stages in your pipeline. You may want to reconsider, using Docker to host your Jenkins server. Now, of course, you can run Jenkins as Kubernetes and all of that. You can create a namespace. Do a lot of things if you understand Kubernetes very well and you want to go that route. The documentation is rich enough. You can go through that to basically understand how to do that. Now, in this particular series that we are doing, we are going to be installing Jenkins on a Linux machine, particularly on Ubuntu server. And that is what we're going to be doing, okay, for different reasons. Because we're also going to be leveraging, the Jenkins Docker agent plugin to see how we can actually use Docker, to, execute the different stages that were defined inside of the pipeline instead of running our builds on the node where Jenkins is running. So we're going to take a look, at that, okay, as we go on. Now, I'm going to click on Linux. Now, as with every application that you want to install, Jenkins also has the hardware requirement, and of course, it has the software requirement. Okay, now, if you look at the requirements that you have here, now, if you want to install Jenkins on Linux, you can install Jenkins on Debian and Ubuntu server or Fedora or Red Hat / Alma or Rocky Linux. Okay, now, if you want to install Jenkins on your Linux machine, there are prerequisites. Like I said, just like for every other application out there that has a prerequisite. In the Docker series, we also saw that, when you want to install Docker, whether you want to install the Docker desktop, there's a prerequisite. Whether you want to install Docker engine, all right, there is prerequisite. And of course, this prerequisite differ based on the platform that you want to install this tool, all right, on. So for Jenkins, if you're installing Jenkins on Debian or Fedora or on any Linux machine, the minimum hardware requirement that we can see here is that you have 256 MB of RAM. Now, that is the minimum hardware requirement. But of course, there's what you see here that is called the recommended hardware configuration for a small team. Now, pay attention to these, all right, descriptions. Okay, because these are pointers to what you need, all right, to meet in terms of requirement in order for you to run this tool efficiently without any kind of issue. So the recommended for a small team says 4 gig of RAM and then 50 gig of drive space. That is the recommended minimum for a small team. So which means if you're building a very large pipeline, okay, you have a lot of processes, a lot of stages within your pipeline. 4 gig is not what you want to settle for. You want to have a Jenkins server that is, robust. And that is where what you call distributed builds, come into the picture. Because with Jenkins, you can actually have other nodes where you can build your jobs on. Okay, I believe in the course of the series, we'll get into that as well. Where you can actually have a Jenkins server, and then you can have another node where your job can actually run on. That is called distributed node, which means you can say that this particular stage should run on this node, this particular stage should run on that node. So basically, your job is not running directly on the Jenkins server itself, but of course, the nodes that have been connected to the Jenkins server. Another way to also do that is use Docker agents. So with Jenkins, you can also have what you call Docker agents, whereby your job actually runs inside of a Docker container, not directly on the Jenkins server. Now, one thing about GitLab, all right, is that GitLab supports, Docker out of the box natively. But with Jenkins, you have to install a plugin that allows you to do that. Is that okay? And then you have to do a lot of tweaking and a lot of configuration. And of course, we're going to get into that, all right, in this series as well. So this is the minimum requirement that you can see here. Now, for the software requirement, Java is a prerequisite. And that is because Jenkins was built with Java. All right, so when you want to run Jenkins, you must have Java installed on your machine. So whether you're running Jenkins as a Docker container or inside a Kubernetes cluster or on Mac OS or Windows OS, you have to have Java installed. All right. Now, if you click on the Java requirement that you have here, it basically will tell you the Java versions that are required and that are supported. So there's the long-term support release and then there's the weekly releases. But of course, like I've always told us on this channel, we always will go with the LTS releases, the long-term support releases, because they have less bugs and they've been tested and they are considered stable versions. Is that okay? Now, if you come here to running Jenkins systems, you can see here that there's Java 8 or Java 11. And for the long-term support release, that is around March 2019. Okay, and of course, if you look at the Java 11 that you have here, all right, that is around September 2022, and this is June 2022 here. And of course, the supported Java version, Java 11 is still supported, but one thing you need to understand is that when you want to run Jenkins using Java 11, Java 11 has actually been deprecated, all right, for Java installation. Now, there are some applications that are still built on Java 11 and you need Java 11 to run them, all right? But that would mean that you may have to think about optimizing those code, all right, in order to support the newer versions of Java, like Java 17 or Java 21. All right, so if you look at what you have here for the newer versions of Jenkins, Java 11 is no longer supported. Because if you look at it here, for Jenkins 2.479 upwards, right, Java 11 is no longer supported. So either you have Java 17 installed or you have Java 21 installed. Is that okay? So in the course of this series, we are going to go with Java 17 because, Java 11 has been deprecated. So we have to use something that is currently supported and, of course, as advised by Jenkins as well. All right. So we're going to go with Java 17. Is that okay? Now, if you scroll down also here, all right, you will see right here, it says on Debian and Debian-based distributions like Ubuntu, you can install Jenkins through the apt packaging manager, right? But it says here, it says with the release of Debian 12, and of course the newer versions of Ubuntu like Ubuntu 24.04, which we're going to be using, it says OpenJDK 11 is no longer included. Okay, it's no longer included. So it has been replaced with what? OpenJDK 17. All right. So when we are installing Jenkins, we need to go with the one that is all right supported. So in the series, we're going to go with Java 17, all right, version. Okay. So that we are sure that we are installing based on best practices. Okay. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing. So here is actually the script that you would have to use to install Jenkins. So it's a shell script which I have copied out, all right, into my Visual Studio Code. I've structured it in such a way that we can actually just bootstrap our EC2 instance with a user data that will install Jenkins for us and install Docker for us, because those two things we're going to need them as we go on in the course of the series. So instead of installing Jenkins now and then installing Docker manually later on, so what I have done is that the shell script that we're going to be using, I have already, structured the Jenkins installation based on what I have here. And of course, I've included Docker with that, so that by the time we're installing the shell script, we're installing two things. We're installing Jenkins and we're also installing Docker. So those are the two things that we are installing. And if you scroll down a bit here, you can see the installation, all right, for Java 17 as well. So we're going to be copying this shell script and the one that we have here together to install Jenkins and to install Java 17. And in addition to that, like I said, we're also going to install Docker because we're going to need it as we go on. Is that okay? So that is what I thought to explain to us. So now let's go over to AWS. Let's spin up a server. Now, based on what we have seen there, based on the requirements, I mean, T2 Micro may not be the ideal instance for us in this case. But of course, if you install Jenkins and T2 Micro, it will run. I mean, if you look at what you have here, the minimum hardware requirement is around 256 MB of RAM. So that means if I have a server that has 1 gig of RAM and one virtual CPU, then I mean, I should still be able to use Jenkins, all right, without any kind of hassle. Okay, I mean, that's fair. All right, but of course, you can go with maybe T3 small that gives you like 2 gig of RAM and 2 virtual CPU. And of course, that will cost you some sense, but of course, it still makes sense at the end of the day. Is that okay? But of course, let's try out with, T2 Micro, first of all, just to install it, and then we can do vertical, upgrade later, basically increasing the instance size and all of that, right? Vertical scaling, I meant to say. All right, so let's go here to the EC2 section. So I'm going to open up my EC2 section right here. Okay, and another requirement that I also want us to look at here is that, Jenkins actually is accessible on port 8080. All right, so if you look at what you have here, it says if you have a firewall installed, you must add Jenkins as an exception. All right, you must change your port in the script below to the port you want to use. All right, and it says port 8080 is the most common, all right, used port. So that means we have to open up the port 8080 in our security group in order for Jenkins, all right, to be installed. Is that okay? So we need to take notes of that as well. Is that all right? So port 8080 has to be opened up. All right. So let's go ahead now and let's take a look at, let's click on instances. Now, in order to be sure that our, shell script is going to work well without any kind of issues, so I'm just going to go with T3 small instance. Is that okay? That's what I'm going to go with. So I'm going to call these, all right, Jenkins. So my Jenkins server, and we're going to go with Ubuntu right here. And of course, we're going with the latest version, which is 24.04. All right, and then I'm going to scroll down here. Of course, I'm going to go outside of the feed here, like I said. So I'm going to use a T3 small instance. Something that is still within budget. Is that okay? Oops, T3 dot small. All right, and if you look at the cost here, for the Linux one, it gives us around 228 cents, which for me, I think that still makes some sense. And for the keypad, let's choose a keypad that we can find. E.g. US one, I think I can find that. And I'm going to edit this and I'm going to select, all right, the VPC that we created together. Okay, and I'm going to put this in the public subnet because we want to be able to access our Jenkins on the web. All right. And of course, I'm going to enable public IP, select existing security group. And I'm going to just go with the default that I have here, right? And for this one, I'm going to change this one to GP2, and I'm going to leave it at 8 gig. I mean, that's still okay. And I'm going to click on advanced details, all right? And I'm going to come right here to user data. All right, now what I would do is to go over here to the shell script. So this is a shell script that we're using. And of course, in the course of this series as well, we're also going to be installing SonarQube so that we can integrate security scanning into the pipeline. So that before we build an image from our Docker file, we want to be sure that our code does not contain any kind of vulnerability. Is that okay? So we'll integrate that, all right, as well. And here's the script for that. So here's the SonarQube script. It's been structured for us. So we just need to copy this and put it in the user data. And then SonarQube is installed automatically. So here's the script, all right, for Sonar. I mean, it's quite a long one, but then we'll walk you through that to basically explain, what you have there. So for the Jenkins script, so here is the OpenJDK 17 being installed. All right, and then here is the source list for Jenkins and all of that. And right here we're doing apt-get install Jenkins, and the last one here is to install Docker. Like I told us, we're going to be installing Jenkins and Docker together because in the later videos we're also going to be doing some things with Docker. All right, so here's the script, and it's going to be in my repo that I will link in the video description, so you can do well to grab the script and just follow along what I'm doing as well. And if you look at what I have here, I'm adding the Jenkins user to the Docker group, and I'm adding my Ubuntu user to the Docker group, so that when I want to do anything with Docker, the Jenkins user, which Jenkins uses to execute the pipeline, can actually also access my Docker, all right, to build an image for me or to whatever it is that I want to do with Docker, right? The Jenkins user should be able to interact with my Docker daemon on that server to carry out that operation. So I'm going to copy all of these, all right, and I'm going to paste it right here in the user data script section, okay? So that makes things a lot more easier. And then I will say launch instance. All right, and of course the instance should launch in no time. And if I go back to instance, it tells me that it's pending. So what we're going to do is just to wait for the status check to be 3/3. And once that is done, we'll come back, log in into our instance and verify if we have Jenkins installed and we have Docker installed, all right, as well. So I'm going to pause here and come back when the status check is 3/3. Now, the status check is 3/3. All right, and we can log in into the Jenkins server to verify if the installation has actually completed. Now we need to check the security group first of all to be sure that we have port 8080 opened up, and then we can now use that to log in into the server. All right, so I'm going to come here. So I have only 80 opened up and then 3000. So I'm going to open up my security group in another tab. All right, and I'm going to come here to edit the inbound rule. All right, and I'm going to change these to 8,000. Oh, sorry, 8080. So let's see if this will go. And then I'm going to save the rule. So that went well. And of course, we can come back to the instance that we have here, go back to details, and we can click on connect to basically go to SH client. And do we have port 22 opened up? I don't think so. So let's go back to the security group also, edit inbound rule, and make sure that we have port 22, all right, opened up right there. And of course, for now, I'm going to save from anywhere, and then I'm going to save that rule. So if I go back to my instance, all right, I can actually grab the example that I have here, and then I can open up my terminal. Okay, go into my downloads, all right, and then I think my key is right here. And then I can paste this and press enter to basically log in into the Jenkins server. All right. Now we have installed Jenkins and we have installed Docker. So what we want to do for now is to verify that this installation actually went through as we expected. Okay. So the first thing I need to do here is to say Docker PS. All right. And right now with this output that I see here, it basically tells me that my Ubuntu user, all right, has actually been added into the Docker group, and my Ubuntu user can execute Docker commands. And so in the same vein, if I do sudo systemctl, all right, status Docker, I can see that truly Docker has been installed, all right, and has been started. So that's a good one. So let's verify Jenkins, right? So if I do sudo systemctl, all right, status, and I say Jenkins, I mean, right here, I can see that truly Jenkins has also been installed. So with the user data script that we use, we're able to install Jenkins and we're able to install Docker, all right, at the same time. So we didn't have to log it into the server manually and then start to do all of that installation one after the other. So we can see the importance of using a short script to bootstrap, the tools that we need, all right, to make it more efficient and all of that. Is that okay? Now, the next thing we need to do, of course, is to install Jenkins. I mean, Jenkins has been installed, really, but then we need to still do some configuration on the browser. We need to start it up and then make it ready for the continuous integration and delivery that we want to use it for. All right. So what I will do then is to come back to my instances here. All right. And I'm going to grab the public IP address of my Jenkins server and then put it that here and then say column 8080, and that would actually take me to the Jenkins, all right, welcome page. So here it says unlock Jenkins. Now, you can unlock Jenkins in two ways. You can actually go through your log, which is systemctl status Jenkins. You can go through that log and actually fetch the default admin password to unlock Jenkins, or you can also go to this particular path, which means you can say cat, and then you can put this path there, and you'll also be able to find the initial, all right, admin password. But if you look at the output that we have here, it says Jenkins initial setup is required, admin user has been created, and a password, blah, blah, blah. And so here is the initial admin password that Jenkins has created. And if you look at the output of this log as well, it says this may also be found at valley Jenkins/secret/initial pass. So it even gives us the location right here in the inside of the log. So that means if I copy this location that I have here, all right, and I say cat, or let's put sudo because it's the root path. So I can say cat, sudo cat, and then I put that right here. I mean, what I see here, okay, what I see right here is the same thing that I also have right here in the log. So you can get the password in the Jenkins log, or you can go to this particular directory and get the Jenkins password as well. I mean, it's still the same thing at the end of the day. So I'm going to copy that and put that right here and then say continue. So that would unlock Jenkins, all right, for us. Now here, we can decide to install the suggested plugins, or we can decide to select the plugins that we want to use. Now I'm going to go with the first option, which means Jenkins, just go ahead and install suggested plugins. I mean, after all, by the time Jenkins is fully installed, I can actually still go into the Jenkins, page, go to the plugin section and still decide the plugins that I want and the ones that I don't want. So why bother myself about, selecting some plugins and then, installing some other ones, right? So we're just going to go ahead with the first option right here, and I'm going to click on that one. So install suggested plugins. So Jenkins will install some default plugins. All right, some that we need, some that we don't need. But of course, let's just allow Jenkins to do, all right, its thing. So it's getting started and it's installing some default plugins. Or of course, in the course of this class, we're still going to add some other plugins that would allow us to do whatever it is that we want to do at the end of the day. Is that okay? So let's wait for Jenkins to complete this getting started phase, and then we come back right after this is done. All right, there you go. So the getting started phase is completed, and now we need to create the first admin user. So the initial admin password that we used was just to get started, okay, to unlock Jenkins and to install some default plugins. Now we need to create our first admin user that we're going to use in the course of this, all right, class. Now the setup is going to be very simple so that, we don't complicate things for ourselves. It's just, if, a training environment where we're getting, we just want to get our hands dirty and, practice Jenkins so we don't have to complicate the username and the password and all of that. So I'm just going to use simple, all right, credentials, okay? So the username is going to be my name. That's Sheon. I'm going to add a little bit of thing to the password so that, you don't just think it's Sheon. So I'm just going to say, all right. So the full name, I'm just going to use that. The email address, I'm just going to use this email address and then save and continue. Okay, now this is the Jenkins URL, save and finish. And right now Jenkins is ready. You can say start using Jenkins. All right. And that will take you, all right, to the Jenkins dashboard. So guys, this is the Jenkins dashboard, and we have a lot, all right, to learn on this particular dashboard. We have a lot of options that you can see on the left side, and under that you have Manage Jenkins, where you have a lot of things that you can do under that. So thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next video where we take our knowledge even further as we learn Jenkins. Thank you, and bye for now.